The story begins with a conference going on among the highest-ranking people of the Knights of Shores, which is a unit built to fight the Demon King's army, but now is recognized as an order. Sitting among them is our frail and fragile protagonist, Joshua, who raises his voice against his childhood friend, Logue, who's now the commander and the hero of the Knights. One day, things get even worse for Joshua when he raises his voice against his childhood friend, Logue, who's now the commander and the hero of the Knights. League plans to go up against humans instead of the demons so he can bank on their weakened state after fighting the Demon King's army and steal their territories, but Joshua raises his voice against him and tells him to come back to his senses. Logue mistakes Joshua's advice for disrespect and bursts out on him like an overgrown man-child. Joshua begs his friend to come to his senses and focus on the Demon King's army instead of fighting against humans. But instead of listening, Logue, drunk on power, tells him that the Order doesn't need him anymore and accuses his tools of being the sole cause of their defeat in the war against the demons. Being humiliated by his very own friend in front of all the members, Joshua cannot believe his ears and asks if he really doesn't need him. Logue's answer leaves our poor, crafty mage frozen in shock as memories of the good old days rush back, when Logue used to praise his creations. Heartbroken, he quietly leaves the place and sets off toward the southern front line, hoping to find work in the war against the demons. The only skill he truly knows is crafting almost anything from the extra dimension, as long as he can gather the right materials. With no one by his side, his pet slime Wiz remains his only companion because, unlike some childhood friends, at least Wiz won't stab him in the back. Walking through the vast emptiness, he stumbles upon his future wife, a weary yet stunning maiden, whose clothes are stained with blood. Rushing to her aid, he quickly realizes she is a demi-human who is being hunted down by ruthless slave traders looking to make easy money. Joshua steps forward, taking the stance of a true hero, but the hunters dismiss him as a nobody because of his NPC-looking dumb face and charge without hesitation. To their complete shock, Joshua activates his absorption magic and yeets all their weapons into his extra dimension in an instant. He then uses his crafting magic to turn the weapons into steel arrows, which pierce through the hunters, taking them down in an instant. The injured maiden, watching everything, blushes as she thanks him, but the pain becomes too much, and she drops to her knees. Seeing her condition, our hero quickly casts his warm and gentle healing magic to ease her wounds. He tells her that the injury on her stomach might reopen and offers to help with it. After getting her approval, he swiftly crafts a cloth and carefully wraps it around her wound. Feeling a little more comfortable, the lady introduces herself as Illya and reveals that she is a demi-human. Joshua does not flinch or show any concern. Instead, he introduces himself and offers to take her to her home. The young lady accepts the offer, and Joshua swiftly lifts her up in her arms, making her blush even harder. Before heading off, he quickly uses his absorption magic to retrieve all the loot from the hunters and starts walking away. Curious about his ability, Illya asks him about it, and he takes a moment to explain. After some time, the two arrive at Illya's village. Standing at the entrance, a demi-human named Met suddenly attacks Joshua with a spear only because he's a human, but Illya stops the attack and explains that Joshua saved her life. As more demon guards surround him, Joshua carefully sets Illya down and raises his hands, making it clear he has no intention of fighting. He apologizes to her and quickly turns to leave, but before he can take a step, Illya grabs his arm and stops him. All of a sudden, a young demi-human comes running and shouts that one of their own has been stabbed while trying to take on an armored boar. The mood instantly shifts as everyone knows how dangerous these beasts are. Joshua is well aware that even a single armored boar usually takes at least 10 human hunters to bring down. In a hurry, Illya asks Joshua to wait inside the village, promising to return the favor later, but he once again offers his help. Wasting no time, they rush to the scene and find a wounded demi-human gasping for air, barely hanging on. Through strained breaths, the man apologizes, admitting he took the risk because his family was starving and he had no other choice. Seeing the wounded, Joshua sits beside him and asks Wiz for a part of his slimy body to craft a powerful potion that instantly patches the demi-human's wound. The moment it is applied, a near-fatal wound heals completely, as if by miracle. The demi-human villagers, stunned by this healing, instantly see Joshua in a new light, treating him like some kind of holy figure. Illya feels overjoyed and wonders how she could ever repay him, but Joshua tells her not to worry about it and asks her to rest as well since she's still not fully recovered. Suddenly, Illya feels lightheaded and orders Met to keep Joshua from leaving before going in to rest. Met thanks Joshua and stops him from leaving, insisting that the chief's orders are absolute. Joshua asks her if it's okay for a human to stay in their village, to which she replies that they absolutely hate smelly humans, but he is an exception because he saved their lives. After that, she starts begging him to teach her magic, even going as far as offering her horn and soul with tears in her eyes. Before the waterworks get out of hand, Joshua calmly explains that he's never had formal training to teach them any magic, but he can craft tools for them instead. This makes Met really happy, and she quickly takes him to the village's weapon house. As Joshua examines them, he notices that the demi-humans only have primitive weapons and rely mainly on melee combat. Taking that into account, he decides to craft some crossbows for them and explains that it's a weapon everyone can use from safety. With this, Joshua activates his crafting magic and makes a fancy crossbow, surprising the demi-human. Met calls his magic a divine blessing, but Joshua corrects her and explains that it is simply his production magic. To demonstrate how the weapon functions, he takes her to an open field, where a single well-placed shot at a distant target leaves her in shock. He then begins training her, and Met quickly gets the hang of it, successfully landing 5 out of 10 shots in a row. Bursting with confidence, she starts bragging like an overexcited kid, claiming she can master any weapon, thanks to the crest of Asura. Joshua thinks that he has never heard of such a crest and recalls the Swordmaster crest, which grants insane blade skills, and wonders if the Asura crest is something unique to demi-humans. After that, he asks Met what she uses to fight normally and creates a cool iron mace for her after hearing her answer, boosting her morale even more. With their weapons ready, the two head out for the hunt. Upon arriving at the location, Joshua spots a wild boar, enjoying its meal, and instructs Met to take aim. Following his command, she fires the crossbow, bringing the creature down with a single shot. Fueled by excitement, Met continues hunting, and after taking down her third target, she shouts in triumph. Joshua asks her to keep it down, but unfortunately, it is too late, as an armored boar joins the party. Met blames herself for the mess and urges our hero to run, but Joshua casually mentions that he used to hunt similar beasts as a kid with his childhood friend. He then lays out a plan and tells her to smack the creature's head with her new weapon while he keeps it busy, assuring her that the beast is as dumb as a rock. Without wasting a second, Joshua activates his magic, sending a flurry of sandy rocks into the creature's eyes. Moving in perfect sync, Met swings her mace with all her might, smashing its head and dropping it on the spot. As the beast lies lifeless, she bursts into tears of joy and tells Joshua how amazing his weapons were. Her heartfelt words make Joshua pause for a moment as he wonders when was the last time someone appreciated him this much. Seeing the villagers cherish his creations fills him with a rare sense of pride, and without a second thought, he promises to craft even more goods for them. The scene shifts to our duo returning to the village with their catch, which leaves Illya feeling so indebted that she now believes she can never repay Joshua. He notices her unease and quickly reassures her by offering to stay in exchange for making tools for them. As night falls, the village comes together for a giant feast in order to celebrate the hunt. Being super tired, Joshua falls asleep, and when he wakes up in the morning, he finds both Illya and Met waiting to greet him in bed. Before it gets too sus, Joshua shifts the topic and says that he will start the day by making new weapons for them. All the villagers catch wind of the news and gather at the village hall. Joshua prepares a large batch of weapons and lets the villagers test them out. However, he notices that Met ends up breaking the bows easily, which makes him wonder if the weapon is not suitable for them. But then Joshua notices Illya holding one of them with a perfect stance. Realizing that she has seen it used before, he quickly crafts an arrow and asks her to try it out. Illya demonstrates flawless execution, leaving Joshua speechless as he remarks that she might have a thing or two for archery. Unable to contain his excitement, he drops a stack of arrows on her to practice with in her spare time. But he doesn't stop there. After tickling Met with wind magic to measure her 3 sizes, he then crafts a simple yet sturdy armor for Met. Joshua tells them that it is strong enough to withstand even the sharp horns of a boar. Eager to make even more things with better materials, he asks the chief if there are any sturdy trees nearby. Without hesitation, Illya leads him to a grove of iron teaks. Joshua recalls them being so tough that even steel axes can barely make a dent in them and suggests searching for something else, but Illya simply raises her axe and, with a single swing, chops down the iron tree, making her idol Chuck Norris proud. The spectacle leaves Joshua's jaw hanging while Illya gives him a proud grin. The villagers cheer for her while Illya boasts that it's all thanks to Joshua's axe. He starts wondering if demi-humans possess far greater muscle power than humans, because even cutting down ordinary trees with such a basic axe is no joke. Within mere minutes, Illya and the villagers present our hero with a massive stack of iron teaks. After cutting them all down, Illya questions how they are supposed to transport such heavy logs. Joshua simply absorbs all of them in an instant, which leaves the lady in sheer awe. She then gets curious and asks Joshua what he is planning on making next. Our boy explains that he would like to make a sturdy fence for their protection, but Illya seems unfamiliar with the concept. To demonstrate, Joshua takes her to the village, and after discussing an ideal location, he begins by constructing an archer tower on a nearby hill. After he poofs a massive tower into existence, she's amazed by how quickly he erected such a big thing. He then takes her up, and while they enjoy the breathtaking view, Joshua explains that by stationing someone here, they could easily spot and alert others of any approaching danger. Joshua then asks Illya to gather him some stones and leaves everyone frozen in shock as he uses them to raise a massive wall along with several more archer towers in the village. With their village protected from danger, the demi-humans quickly prepare for another feast. Met personally cooks a delicious meal for Joshua, and as they eat, the conversation drifts to how she learned to cook from her parents. This eventually leads her to talk about the previous chief and the devastating orc invasion that struck the village 10 years ago. Hearing about it, Joshua recalls it as the war that humans lost, but he never imagined that demi-humans had suffered just as much as humans during that time. Met goes on with her story and explains that the giant orcs seemed particularly interested in their horns. Their village chief had attempted to negotiate a truce, but the orcs broke their word and went on a rampage. Illya became their target because her horns were uniquely rare even among their own kind. One day, while playing outside, Met threw a stone at one of the orcs, but as mere children, she was powerless. The orcs easily overpowered them and tore Illya's horn straight from her head. Her agonized screams brought her parents rushing in to protect them, and buying just enough time for the girls to escape. That was the last time Met could ever see her parents. After that, their former chief went alone to face the orcs and returned, barely clinging to life. With his final breaths, he returned Illya's horn and passed on the duty of the village chief to Illya. Met then points toward a hill to show Joshua the chief's grave, but to her surprise, she finds a watchtower standing there over the grave. Confused, she asks why he built it on that spot, to which Joshua explains that Illya had allowed it. As they talk about her, they begin to wonder where she has run off to. Met confidently states that Illya is most likely practicing with the bow Joshua made for her. She describes how tirelessly Illya trains, dedicating herself to keeping everyone safe. Joshua asks about Illya's crest and learns that it is called Hanya. Met explains the nature of Illya's crest, describing it as one of gentleness and healing. She believes this perfectly mirrors their chief's selfless nature, as Illya cares for them so deeply that she often puts herself in harm's way, even acting as a decoy to protect them from danger. Because of this, Met feels an immense desire to grow stronger, determined to one day return the favor. As Joshua listens, he enjoys his meal and assures her of his support. But before he can fully process the moment, an unexpected announcement catches him completely off guard. With boundless energy and without seeking any approval, Met boldly declares her marriage to him. Joshua immediately objects, insisting that there is no need for such a decision just to make him stay, especially since he has already planned to remain in the village for a while. Illya, with her eyes widening in shock, instantly rushes in and erupts with fury at Met, berating him for taking things this far. When Met questions whether she also wants Joshua to leave, Illya, completely flustered and drenched in sweat, boldly proclaims that she will be the one to marry him instead. With this, a heated argument breaks out between the two, with each determined to claim the role of Joshua's bride. Seizing the chance, Joshua activates full stealth mode and slips away as quietly as a greasy gamer sneaking to the fridge at 3 a.m. By the time Illya and Met realize he's gone, he's already in bed and safe from the chaotic family drama. At the village border, Illya wonders about his plans for the day, and he answers that he wants to fix the miserable state of her backwater village. Noticing the puzzled look on their faces, he asks the ladies whether they know of any place with shiny brown rocks or raw iron. Illya replies that she hasn't really seen anything like that in the nearby forest, but she recalls seeing such rocks in the Aster Cave. Joshua questions how they'll get there, to which Illya replies that no one has ventured there in ages due to the bats. Following that, she offers to guide him, but Met quickly clings to him, insisting that she should be the one to go since the chief shouldn't risk herself. Our hero agrees that everyone would worry about Illya, and after seeing Met's glistening eyes, Illya reluctantly steps back and bids them farewell. Later that day, the duo reaches the Aster Cave with their nerves on edge as eerie sounds echo from within. Met gets pumped up and moves toward the entrance, but Joshua stops her and points out that the bats inside could give her rabies. Joshua hands her a torch and tells her to yeet it inside. But something weird happens. The torch is instantly put out, making the two wonder if there's a pond inside. Just to be safe, they hide out in the bushes when, all of a sudden, a massive glob of diarrhea comes crawling out like a Dark Souls boss. Joshua quickly recognizes that it's a dust slime, which is a nasty mutant that gobbles up anything in sight. Hearing him say it's nothing too dangerous, Met whips out her spear and claims that she'll easily take it down, while bragging that she doesn't need Illya's backup. But the instant she slashes into the slime, it casually absorbs her weapon. The moment she stabs into the slime, it effortlessly absorbs her weapon. Met refuses to let go of the spear Joshua crafted for her, and the slime spits her out with great force. Joshua instantly summons a magic shield to catch her and conjures a massive pillar beneath the slime to stall it while carrying the muscle-brained girl as useless as Sakuta in a princess hold. Noticing how much he worries about her, Met offers an apology, but the slime homing in from behind doesn't give Joshua a chance to breathe. He considers putting her down to fight it himself when suddenly, a familiar face appears and steals the dust slime's attention. Illya charges in like Zorro, blasting the slime to smithereens with the sheer force of her sword. Taken aback by her brute approach, Joshua wonders just how much she's swung his katana to reach such strength. Shortly after, the worried villagers arrive, and Met apologizes for her reckless actions. With the aura of a true chief, Illya reminds Met that it's her duty to protect everyone, making our teary-eyed musclehead vow that she'll train harder than before. Watching the strange yet heartwarming way the two worry about each other, a warm smile flashes across Joshua's face. Mere seconds later, Illya starts lecturing Met to stop being a baka and listen when she's told to stay put. Joshua tries to cheer her up, saying that he was also at fault. After she tells Met to get some rest, Joshua celebrates that now they can mine all night with the dust slime gone. Illya gets curious and asks what Joshua plans to do with the resources, leading him to excitedly yap about how shock-proof dust slime armor is and its giant magic crystal can make powerful enchanted weapons. With that settled, Joshua steps into the cave, knowing it's going to be free of danger now that the boss is gone. Inside, they are caught off guard by the sheer number of slimes, one of which mutated into the extra-large poop emoji, but Wiz hops in to have a little chat with his jiggly buddies and clears the way. As the party delves deeper, Joshua is surprised by the sight of the walls shimmering in a stunning purple hue. Pulling out his trusty pickaxe, he takes a swing to investigate, making his eyes nearly pop out when he realizes he's holding the ultra-rare violet iron. Everyone gives him odd looks while our rock nerd goes on about how cool it is, so Illya translates his yapping that the rare rock is useful. So once Joshua crafts everyone a pickaxe, the villagers join in on the mining, while the slimes help transport the haul outside until a massive pile is stacked up. After a steamy session of mining with Illya and the others, Joshua heads out to find what looks like a lifetime supply, and gets all giddy imagining all the cool pots and tools he can craft. A villager curiously asks if he can craft weapons as well, to which he replies with a resounding yes. Later that day, as Illya strolls through the chatting crowd, Joshua calls her over and reveals that he has made something special just for her and hands it to her. He hands her a katana, which she holds high before asking what it's supposed to be. Joshua explains that while he was browsing the library for inspiration, he came across the massive blades once wielded by her ancestors. Illya then asks why he gave it to her first, so Joshua confesses that it's the perfect weapon for the village's helicopter mom. Illya gladly accepts the gift and thanks him, when out of nowhere, Met barges in, looking visibly jealous. Met stares death at him and starts whining about wanting one, too, so Joshua promises to make one for her as well. This only makes Illya feel more indebted to him, but he tells her that he's simply happy to see her sad village thriving. With that settled, he shifts his focus to measures on how to fix a few key issues that need solving. The lack of safety from the wild, the unreliable food supply from hunting, and the lack of crops are pressing concerns, but the most urgent problem is hygiene. While the demi-humans shower more often than the losers watching this video, they could really use a proper water source to keep their clothes and surroundings clean and avoid disease. For the sake of his new home, Joshua strengthens his resolve to turn the village into a thriving place in no time. The next day, the entire village is shaken by the sound of howling wolves. Amid the confusion, Joshua instructs Met to prepare everyone for a fight, ensuring that all capable archers gather at the northern border. As the group moves toward the source of the noise, the howls grow even louder. Joshua gets curious and asks Met how many enemies there could be, which she guesses over 100 from their footsteps. Illya is visibly concerned at first, but as she looks more closely, her expression turns into shock. When everyone looks toward what they thought were attackers, they are speechless to see a pack of werewolves who have abandoned their home. Joshua recalls that werewolves tend to live far from society due to the threat of hunters and asks Illya about their injuries. She confirms that they were probably attacked by slave hunters and quickly stops Met before she orders the archers to attack. A tiny pup that looks strangely familiar appears, and then it clicks in Joshua's mind that it's the same wolf that Illya's attackers tried to kidnap. Introducing herself as Merc, the werewolf chief begs for passage through the village, explaining that her people were raided by scummy slave traders. Sympathizing with her fellow chief, Illya wastes no time in ordering Met to open the gates and allows the weary werewolves inside. Just as their gates close, Joshua is startled by the slaver traders shouting as they approach, but halt in confusion as they spot the fortress in the middle of nowhere. Suspecting they might be holding hostages, Joshua refuses to let the trash army escape and orders Met to command her men to mow them down. The villagers launch their arrows and tear through them, which gets the slave traders panicked as they desperately cry out that they're on the same side, claiming they only came to capture some worthless demi-humans. Without hesitation, Joshua yells that he's not human and demands the immediate release of any hostages. Utterly speechless at the realization that this fortress belongs to demi-humans, the lowlifes try to run away with the werewolf children. Met curses at the cowards, but before Joshua can cook up a plan to catch them, Illya yeets herself off the wall and flies straight towards the army of NPCs. Before they even react, the chief slices through them like she's playing a bootleg fruit ninja. In a desperate move, one of the slavers grabs a wolf girl, holding her hostage. Illya offers to let him go if he releases her, which he accepts. But then, another piece of steaming hot garbage behind her says that she better scram or else. Seeing the precious little girl absolutely horrified, Illya goes ultra instinct and amputates the waste of oxygen. But before she puts him down for good, Joshua's voice snaps her out of it. He yells that she should return before it gets dangerous, and everyone celebrates her brave move. While Joshua stands there drooling over his future wife like a loser, Met takes over and gives orders on how to handle the injured. Merc approaches Illya and Joshua and surprises the two by repeatedly thanking them along with a formal introduction like an iPod stuck on replay. Illya tells the good girl to relax and asks where she came from. The little puppy explains that her people lived at the base of a mountain for a long time until the Fire Nation attacked. When Joshua inquires if all the slave traders came after them, Merc reveals that there were many more of the fire mages. Our hero quickly realizes that they'll need stone walls to withstand any future attacks from fire users. Setting that thought aside, he then questions whether they've met before, which the wolfie confirms. Joshua finds this pretty sus and shocks both Met and Illya by accusing the cheeky little wolf of intentionally dumping the attackers onto them. But instead of denying it, the good girl surprises him by admitting that she only tracked him down by following his musty virgin smell, hoping perhaps our sweaty protagonist could help her. Hearing her beg for their assistance, Illya gladly offers to fight for the wolves, but Met isn't satisfied and asks what's next. Merc simply asks that they give the werewolves food and shelter temporarily, and in return, they will do whatever the village asks them. She continues that the slave hunters are pretty ruthless, so the demi-humans have to band together to fight them. Met agrees while saying that an enemy's enemy is a friend, so she decides to help them out. Seeing her injuries, Illya also tells little Merc to rest up well. Later, when she's sleeping soundly, Joshua feels bad for the tired, poor thing and asks Illya to take a break as well. A villager then arrives while hauling a massive stack of loot scavenged from the fallen enemies. As Joshua examines the armor, his eyes immediately lock onto a familiar emblem, the seal of the Cortesia Company, known for being knee-deep in the kind of illegal activities that make even Diddy look like a Scooby-Doo villain. His worries grow as he realizes that they'll definitely need stronger defenses to deal with the organization and their infamous mages if they wish to avoid the same fate as Merc's people. The next morning, Joshua wakes to find 3 ladies waiting for him instead of 2, with Merc now joining them. As expected from the werewolf tribe, she has shifted from her fluffy wolf form into a demi-human lowly. Joshua leads them to the fence he built, recalling what he learned about the fire mages in the Cortesia Company. Unsure of their true potential, he decides to reinforce the fence to ensure it can withstand their attacks. Thinking of a fire-resistant material, Joshua turns to Merc, who's now back in her wolf form, and asks if she remembers any areas with exposed rocky ground. Merc confirms, asking if he's looking for a rugged and cool place, and suggests that he might find something suitable across the Eastern River. Considering the Eastern River is wide and potentially dangerous, Joshua asks if there's another way across instead of having to swim. Met jumps in with a ridiculous suggestion, offering herself as a piggyback ride. Joshua immediately shuts her sad offer for a Magikarp ride down, pointing out that there might be aquatic monsters lurking beneath the surface. Illya asks if they're really heading to the other side of the river, and when Joshua confirms, Merc volunteers to be their guide for the day. She warns them to stay alert as they might run into some big bad boars along the way. Both Illya and Met decide to tag along, and Joshua gladly allows it, thinking he could use the extra hands in an unfamiliar place. Before they set off, he crafts a sturdy set of armor for Illya. Then, turning to Merc, he asks if she can track down a specific type of clay. Wasting no time, Merc sniffs the air, picks up the scent, and leads him straight to the spot. As Joshua starts digging up the clay, Merc curiously asks why he needs it. He simply tells her it's useful, then gives her a quick demonstration by shaping a cup. He explains that it's much sturdier than wooden alternatives. Joshua continues that the material can also be used for crafting tiles and bricks. Handing the task off, he asks Illya to have the villagers dig up more later. With that settled, he leads the 3 ladies to the riverbank. Upon seeing the river, Illya comments on how wide it is, but instead of worrying, Joshua begins crafting a series of bridge steps and leaves everyone stunned. With this, not only do they avoid getting soaked, but they also won't have to worry about being swept away by the current. As they walk across, Joshua continuously adds new steps to complete the bridge and showcases his sweaty Fortnite building skills. Curious, he asks Merc how she managed to cross the river before. She explains that to the north, the river narrows enough for her to simply hop across from rock to rock. As the others enjoy the scenery, Joshua notices Merc quietly sniffing the mountain air. He realizes the hardship her people must have endured and briefly wonders if there's something he can do to help. However, he quickly pushes the thought aside, reminding himself that fortifying the wall is the priority for now. Once they cross the river, Merc leads them straight to the kind of place Joshua had requested. With his keen eye, he immediately spots signs of rocks being cut away. Curious, he asks Merc if she's ever encountered anyone here besides the boars. Merc shakes her head, explaining that she rarely visits this area since the monsters are too tough to handle. Meanwhile, Joshua sees no immediate threat and just a few rabbits hopping around. Sensing no danger, he pulls out his legendary drill and gets straight to work, cutting into the rock. To everyone's shock, the moment Joshua starts drilling, the rocks at the center suddenly shift, gathering together to form a massive golem. Joshua freezes at the sight and quickly yells for Illya to wait, but she's already leaped into action. With a swift slash, Illya severs the golem's leg, only to watch in disbelief as it regenerates within seconds. Realizing her mistake, she apologizes to Joshua for acting on her own, admitting that her weapon is useless against it. Joshua quickly points to a glowing red stone embedded in the golem's core, explaining that unless they break it, the creature will keep regenerating. Before they can come up with a plan, the golem suddenly launches a barrage of stones at them, forcing everyone to scatter. Joshua quickly comes up with a plan and instructs Met and Illya to destroy the red stone as soon as he exposes it. After making sure that Merc is safe, he dashes straight toward the golem. Illya gets worried and calls for him to stop, but he insists that he's the only one who can pull this off. Without hesitation, he activates his absorption magic, explaining that since the golem constantly replenishes its rocks, he'll absorb them at an even faster rate to weaken it. Once he's absorbed enough, he signals the two. Met leaps forward and lands a powerful strike on the golem, clearing the way for Illya to finish the job. Illya, already waiting for the right moment, dashes in and slashes through the crystal. Joshua catches the now split crystal and praises the two for their excellent work. He then shows them the puppet stone of the golem, explaining that it's usually fragile like glass and crumbles once the golem is destroyed. However, since Illya cut it cleanly in half, they can now use it to create 2 rock puppets instead of just 1. Curious, Illya asks if the puppet monsters might turn against them. Joshua reassures her, explaining that the puppets obey whoever's name is engraved on their stones. He also adds that even if the stone already has someone else's name on it, they can always overwrite it. Joshua decides to make one right on the spot and uses the crystal to craft a golem. Illya is left flabbergasted, baffled by the sheer number of things our boy can create. After completing the puppet golem, he orders it to cut out a cube-shaped rock from the ground. The puppet monster immediately follows the command, pulling out a massive rock. Seeing this, Met takes it as a challenge, declaring that she'll lift an even bigger one. However, after struggling for a moment, she ultimately admits defeat. Joshua, on the other hand, is more than satisfied, considering the puppet their newest and most reliable partner. As the scene shifts, the demi-humans erupt into panic at the sight of a massive golem approaching their village. Met quickly steps in, trying to calm them down by explaining that the giant creature is actually a puppet golem and their new ally. Meanwhile, Illya turns to Joshua, eyeing the pile of rocks he brought along. She asks what he plans to do with them, and he explains that they'll be used to build a stronger wall for the village. However, gathering enough materials will take time. For now, our hero focuses on reinforcing the north gate, recognizing it as their weakest point. He channels his magic and erects a towering wall before them, leaving the demi-humans in awe. Even Joshua himself can't quite believe he just pulled off something so massive. Joshua then declares that the next step is to test the wall's strength. Without missing a beat, Met eagerly pulls out her weapon, but before she can unleash a Hulk smash, Joshua stops her as he points out that the wall would definitely collapse with her strength. Just then, Joshua remembers the fire mages and realizes he needs to speed up the rebuilding process. Determined, he shifts his focus to constructing the walls entirely out of stone. Using the rocks brought by his golem, he continues fortifying the village at an impressive pace. Judging by his progress, he's confident that the wall will be complete by the next day. As for the wooden materials salvaged from the old fence, he figures they can be repurposed to build sturdier houses for the villagers. As Joshua is busy working on the wall, Met comes running and shouting his name. She frantically asks if he has seen Merc, explaining that the wolf lady has been missing since morning. Her worry is evident, and Joshua pauses to take in her concern. Back when the werewolves first arrived in their village, Met didn't think much of them. But after seeing how hard they worked, her feelings changed, and now she's more worried about them than anyone else. Seeing how anxious she is, Joshua reassures her that he'll look for Merc and asks her to focus on preparing food in the meantime. Looking around, Joshua stumbles upon the village chief and asks if Merc is with her. Even Illya doesn't have a clue about her whereabouts. With no leads, the two decide to ask some of the werewolves, who are hard at work. The werewolves inform them that their chief's daughter ventured off to the south, hoping to find some good mushrooms. Just as Joshua and the village chief prepare to go after her, the werewolves stop them, expressing their gratitude. They argue that Joshua and the others have already done so much for them and insist on handling the search themselves. Hearing this, Illya starts lecturing the werewolves and tells them to stop pushing themselves too hard. She firmly states that she would never want them to hurt themselves for the sake of repaying a debt. One of the werewolves nods and assures her that he understands her concern and will pass her message along to the rest of his kin. With that settled, Joshua and Illya set off toward the southern river, Joshua silently hoping Merc wasn't swept away. As the sun begins to set, they quicken their pace. On their way, Joshua relates to Merc's struggles and tells Illya that he knows exactly how she must be feeling. He recalls how, when his hometown burned down, he was just a kid. No matter where he went, people drove him away, seeing him as nothing more than a useless burden. Illya interjects, finding it hard to believe that anyone would be so cruel to someone as kind as him. But Joshua shakes his head, insisting that he really was useless back then. Desperation pushed him to train relentlessly, not only in magic but also swordsmanship. Seeing Merc, he can't help but feel she's going through the same thing, seeking approval, just like he once did. Illya grows nervous and asks Joshua if he means that Merc fears being driven away if she can't contribute. Joshua nods, explaining that some demi-humans actually do that. Worried that the girl might end up hurting herself, Illya insists they talk to her right away, and the two hurry ahead to find her. As they scan the area near the eastern river, Illya suddenly spots Merc and quickly points her out. Joshua looks over and finds the wolf girl sitting alone on a stone in the middle of the river, with no way to cross back. Joshua quickly puts together a bridge, figuring the poor girl might have gotten stuck here because of the rising water. As the bridge reaches her, Merc wastes no time jumping on and immediately questioning Illya and our hero about why they're here. Since Joshua is too much of a softie to ever get mad, Illya takes over, snapping at Merc for wandering into such a dangerous place all by herself. Not wanting to face Ilya's wrath, Merc quickly ducks behind Joshua and insists the place isn't dangerous at all. Illya keeps scolding her like a worried mom, making it clear she never wants to be put through this kind of stress again. Once Merc promises to behave, Illya, remembering Joshua's advice, softens up. She reassures Merc that she and her werewolf friends have been a huge help without them. They never would have found the clay. With a bit of clever wording, Illya nudges Merc toward realizing that the werewolves have strengths humans lack, and by working together, both sides could live much happier lives. Merc finally gets the point and agrees, shaking hands with Illya. With that settled, Joshua argues that it's about time they head back home. But Merc suddenly pulls out a basket of mushrooms she gathered. She proudly explains that these aren't just any mushrooms but magical ones, and besides being food, they can even be used as medicine. As they get home, Merc sneaks a peek at what's cooking. The moment she spots fruit mixed with meat in the pot, she can't resist taunting Met, questioning if she even knows how to cook. Joshua steps in, throwing in a mild jab at Met himself before reassuring everyone that, based on his past experience with her cooking, there's nothing to worry about. After the food is ready, Merc takes a bite and is unexpectedly delighted. Instead of complaining, she declares that this might be the best meal she's ever had. Met proudly mentions that she even added the mushrooms she brought along, which seemed to have won everyone's approval. Just before Met starts gobbling up the food like Pac-Man, a sudden noise comes from the rooftop. When they look up, they spot a new kind of demi-human one with wings. Merc gets curious and wonders if the newcomer is after her meat and steps forward to ask. But before she can, the girl suddenly faints. She plummets straight down, but before she can hit the ground, Joshua quickly sends his slime ahead. It stretches out just in time and cushions her fall as she lands safely on its bouncy surface. The gang stands there looking bamboozled, all wondering what kind of demi-human the little girl is. Met gently scoops her up while Joshua reassures the pained girl that she's in good hands. He asks Illya to prepare a bed for her, and in the meantime, Met hands her a warm cup of soup, sending her straight into dreamland. Though Joshua is relieved that she's finally asleep, Met remains puzzled, unable to pinpoint exactly what species the girl belongs to. Later, when Merc is sneaking away some meat like a cheeky little gremlin, she smugly boasts her knowledge that the girl is a Tangu. The little wolf explains that she knows this because the Tangu live near the mountain where she grew up. Illya calls out to them, saying that her bed is ready, so Joshua casts some healing magic on the girl before tucking her into a nice and cozy blanket. Our hero asks his buddy Wiz to keep an eye on her while he's away, especially since the entire village is eyeing her down like she's Taylor Swift. Met quickly pulls the crowd away by announcing that the food is ready. After that, Merc surprises Joshua by saying that it's awesome that he can use 2 magics since even using one is out of the ordinary. Joshua is amazed by her guess and asks how she knew, to which the wolf smugly replies that she can sense anyone's magical talent. When Joshua asks if she knows any magic, Merc hesitantly demonstrates her wind magic outside by summoning a measly tornado slightly tinier than her. Illya pats the poor girl's head while Joshua changes the subject, instead asking if she has a clue about her crest. Merc tells him that hers is the white wolf, said to have an affinity for healing and ice magic. This gives our boy an idea, so he asks her if her mom taught Merc anything about them. She answers that her mother didn't really know much about magic. This surprises Joshua, so he decides to give her a crash course on sorcery. Their first lesson begins with an attempt to freeze a bucket of water, but before that, Joshua crafts a wand just as miniature as Merc. With that, soon she focuses on the target, and the water instantly solidifies, refusing to budge even when she shakes it up and down. Joshua makes the cutie pie blush with a shower of compliments and assures her that with enough practice, she'll get the hang of it in no time. Out of nowhere, an idea strikes him that her magic can be used for some new facilities. The next morning, while their guest is sound asleep, Joshua gathers the party and leads them to a hole in the ground that he had the villagers dig for him. As they descend, he proudly boasts about how solid and safe it is. Reaching the bottom, Merc's jaw drops at the sight of the massive empty room. Joshua grins and tells her that all this is hers to practice freely. He openly admits his ulterior motive to use her ice as a freezer for her favorite meat and fish, so Merc is more than happy to go along. Joshua tells the little chief that he's counting on her since he's pretty much worthless at everything besides crafting. Merc silently stares at his sorry self, prompting him to awkwardly switch the topic, saying he'll go check on the village walls. But she asks to come along since she can hear the Tangu girl throwing a tantrum outside. The two rush to the surface, where they see the little girl acting tough in front of Illya as she's dead set on leaving. Joshua casually asks the little gremlin where she plans to go with her tiny wings and suggests they introduce themselves before she leaves. His instant control over the situation sparks a hint of jealousy in Illya. After an awkward silence, the lowly finally opens up and shyly mutters that her name is Asuha. Merc and Illya return the gesture with a smile, but our boy brings her back to reality, reminding her that if she takes off again, she'll come crashing down again. To help with that, he offers to hook her up with a gadget. The ladies stare at him in shock and hesitantly ask if Joshua is going to craft wings. To their surprise, he simply cooks up a magic wand and tells Asuha to use wind magic with it to make flying much easier. Armed with her new wand, the lowly chants a wind spell and unleashes a powerful gale of wind. Joshua gladly gifts her the wand, and Merc is captivated by its special green stone, different from her own. Our hero explains that they got the wind magic stone from the dust slime, making it the perfect tool to help Asuha's itty-bitty wings carry her giant head. The little girl gives it a shot, and everyone is forced to shut their eyes as a powerful tornado engulfs her, launching her into the air. Both Joshua and Asuha are absolutely amazed that she's actually flying, while Illya is speechless, seeing magic used so differently. He compliments Illya for getting them the stone and remarks that the flying lowly doesn't lack talent either. Asuha finally lands and thanks him for the priceless gift before trying to return it. Joshua waves her off, insisting that nothing would bring him more joy than helping her fly. In return, he seeks a favor from the Tangu tribe, asking them to alert the village whenever they spot humans or any other threats nearby. Asuha readily agrees but mentions the need for permission first. Illya assures her that their support will always be available and urges her to stay vigilant against slavers. After expressing her gratitude, the lowly takes off into the sky. Met soon joins the group, casually noting that while Joshua and Illya are far too kind, that's exactly what she loves about them. To keep things lively, she throws in a playful reminder about an old favor, leaving the flustered chief with no choice but to ask if Joshua can craft a new flute to replace her broken one. Once she tells him what it looked like, Joshua poofs one out with his magic, making the girls swoon over him. Met asks the chief to give it a shot, so Joshua anxiously awaits her song, thinking it couldn't be any less sweeter than her. But the ear-deafening screeches that follow make him beg Illya to stop before she gives them permanent brain damage. The traumatized trio silently stares at Illya as she excuses herself for being rusty. The chief vows to sharpen her flute skills, bringing Merc to tears, while Joshua contemplates whether the melody could serve as a war anthem. As he turns to check on the flying Tangu girl drifting happily through the sky, he silently wishes her a safe journey home. That, however, does not happen. The next day, Joshua beams with satisfaction, seeing how well the golems and slimes have reinforced the village walls. But his excitement fades when Merc, who is visibly anxious, rushes over to inform him that the northern guards have spotted a massive fire. At the northern wall, Merc peers through a scope, quickly identifying the blaze source the Tangu village. Concerned they may have been attacked, she stiffens as Illya steps up behind her, urging Joshua to prepare everyone for an emergency. Just as he turns to rally the villagers, his eyes land on Asuha, limping toward them alongside an injured flock of her people. With no doubt that the slavers have struck again, Joshua rushes forward, demanding to know what happened. Tears spill from Asuha's eyes as she reveals that her entire village has been reduced to ashes. Even the sight of Joshua, a human, makes one of the Tangu kids scream in panic, and upon hearing his cries, chaos ensues among the winged demi-humans. Illya chimes in, saying that Joshua would never hurt them, but they couldn't care less about the hornless girls yapping. Asuha convinces them that Illya's people saved her life and allowed them into the village without hesitation. Both sides exchange apologies before the chief assures them they can rest without concern. Merc steps in, offering to heal anyone injured, and Asuha explains that the wounded are only a small group who managed to escape. The rest were either taken or burned alive. Joshua, puzzled by the sheer brutality, listens as she hesitantly describes a human who summoned massive flames. His thoughts instantly connect to the same fire sorcerer responsible for the attack on Merc's village. Asuha recalls how the mage reduced the Tangu forest to ashes, making it effortless for weak-foot soldiers to capture survivors. Joshua, knowing only one fire mage with that level of power, asks what the man looked like. She describes him as wearing a purple robe and endlessly rambling about being the child of a fire deity. The moment she says it, a name from his past screams through Joshua's mind. Asuha then reveals that on her flight back, she passed through the west, where several of her friends vanished without a trace. There, she spotted a human town where the horned demi-humans and werewolves were forced into slavery. Joshua and Illya's faces go pale hearing this, and Asuha continues that once she told her father, who left to get some milk and never returned. The very next day, she discovered him among the victims of the sorcerer's flames. Hearing her story, Joshua concludes that since no human settlements should exist in this area, the only possibility is the Cortesia Company. Realizing an attack on the village is inevitable, he pushes them for a preemptive strike before his waifus end up cooked. Without wasting time, he calls Illya, Met, and Merc to form a battle plan. Rather than waiting like helpless prey, he suggests they take the fight to the enemy. Illya agrees that the slavers' atrocities cannot be forgiven, regardless of their shared race with Joshua. He repeats that attacking first will give them the advantage. Met, fired up, admits she has long dreamed of crushing the scummy humans. However, Joshua reminds her that charging recklessly isn't an option. Their priority must be saving the hostages. Merc asks if he intends to weaken the enemy by drawing them out before storming the fortress, and he confirms the strategy. To make it work though, he tasks the slimes and werewolves with digging up large amounts of coal, a crucial element in the trap he plans to spring on the scumbags. He then catches Merc off guard by asking the werewolves to act as decoys, using their unmatched speed to lure the slavers out of their base. Finally, he turns to Asuha and requests her to scout the enemy camp's exact location so they can set up their traps and deliver well-earned retribution. The lowly brigade promises not to disappoint. After Merc departs, Joshua gives Asuha a heads up that he will need her wind magic later. With that, they part ways. Shortly after, Illya and Met arrive, and he hands over command to them, explaining that this time, he intends to be the bait. Both women turn pale and try to dissuade him. But knowing exactly who his enemy is, Joshua resolves to face them himself. He instructs Illya to wait for his signal at the gate and expresses his gratitude for always standing by his side. Turning to Met, he orders her to repeat his commands exactly as he gives them and mentions his plan to arm the towers. Out of nowhere, he conjures a ballista, leaving the ladies baffled by the unfamiliar weapon. However, the moment Met hears it fires enormous arrows, her eyes gleam with excitement. Just as she prepares to test it out, Joshua tells her to hold off, reminding her that it is their trump card. At the same time, a sudden interruption grabs their attention. The golems and slimes arrive with boatloads of coal, and our crafty mage shares his plans to make it into a flammable diarrhea that their Tangu squad will dump on the Cortesia scum. He explains that they'll shoot lit arrows at them afterward, causing a wildfire worse than the Amazon rainforest. The scene shifts to Joshua directing a villager on where to position a hay trap when he notices the lowly brigade approaching. They inform him that their enemies are only a few minutes away. Without hesitation, Commander Joshua orders them to flank the approaching forces and capture any deserters. When the young fighters express concern about him facing the enemy alone, he reassures them that he is never truly alone, counting on steadfast allies like Illya and Met. More than anyone, he believes it is his responsibility to put an end to human greed. As the scene shifts, the humans pursuing the werewolves find themselves drawn toward the northern wall. Uncertain if their prey is still nearby, they grow uneasy at the sight of a massive fortress ahead, questioning whether they have mistakenly taken the wrong path. Frustration spreads among the hunters as they begin blaming one another for losing the werewolf's trail. The argument threatens to escalate, but before it spirals out of control, their leader, the fire mage Burnish, catches sight of a werewolf standing atop the wall. Noticing this, Joshua steps forward to try and talk things out. Burnish demands to know our boy's identity, and Joshua quickly states his name before pressing him about what he has been doing with the demi-humans. Recognizing the name, Burnish recalls Joshua as Logue's lackey with the crafting magic crest and smugly brags about the time he allowed Joshua to sharpen his pathetic sword. This confirmation fuels our boy's suspicions, and he furiously responds that he remembers Burnish, insisting that he put an end to his slave trading business and go to school where he belongs. In response, Burnish mocks Joshua, belittling him as a magic engineer who barely managed to enter a magic academy while boasting about his own status as an honor student at Verso's Magic University. As Joshua anticipates, Logue's cousin Burnish mirrors his arrogance, judging others solely by their crests. Burnish repeats his question about the slave trading, pointing out that it is forbidden by the temple. With a casual tone, Burnish dismisses the rules as something meant for the weak, claiming that his actions are not for money but for his own amusement, a remark that fuels Met and Illya's anger. He adds that no experience at the Magic University could ever bring him the same thrill, describing the screams of the demi-humans as a sound he finds soothing. Continuing to mock Joshua, Burnish expresses relief at not being born a loser like him. In an attempt to provoke him, Joshua fires back that he'd rather die than become someone as cringe as Burnish. Enraged by the insult, Burnish declares that Joshua should feel grateful to die by the hands of a magician as superior as himself, unleashing a high-level fire spell at him. Driven by fury over the innocent demi-humans Burnish has slaughtered, Joshua uses his magic space, releasing a shower of powdered coal just as planned. Burnish quickly realizes what Joshua has done and, seeing the inevitable outcome, he yells at him to stop. But it is too late. The powdered coal has already caught fire, and with its fat content, extinguishing the flames is nearly impossible. As the fire spreads, Burnish and those around him pee their pants, and their panic only gets worse as Asuha and her kin continue to rain down more coal. The remaining hunters, overwhelmed by fear, scream and scatter in a desperate attempt to escape. However, their fate takes a cruel turn when those who manage to flee towards the forest find themselves face to face with the very werewolves they had been hunting. The creatures emerge, ready to claim their revenge. Even Illya, without a shred of mercy, ensures the hunters meet the brutal end they rightfully deserve. Met, along with her people and a few werewolves, charges at the fleeing humans, catching them off guard. The sudden attack throws the remaining hunters into a panic, forcing them to abandon the forest route and rush toward the riverbank instead. As Met races after them, ready to strike, Joshua calls out, instructing her to capture the men alive so they can be questioned. Noticing Met's eagerness, Merc voices concern that she might accidentally kill them, suggesting the task be left to her instead. Without hesitation, both Met and the werewolves continue their pursuit. Meanwhile, Asuha, still visibly nervous, approaches Joshua and quietly expresses her gratitude for his help. Joshua, wearing a sad expression, admits he's also relieved they managed to take them down. With victory in sight, some of the demi-humans start discussing whether they should attack the enemy base and rescue their captured friends. Illya turns to our boy, asking if that's really the best course of action. But Joshua hesitates as he can't stand the thought of losing anyone. Instead of shutting the idea down completely, he offers an alternative. Their goal isn't to seize the base, but to free the captured demi-humans. Seeing Met return with the ones who tried to escape, Joshua quickly crafts a mask and puts it on, confidently commanding everyone to follow his lead. After tying all the soldiers up, Joshua acts like he's grown a pair and demands they tell him how many men are in their fortress. The men ignore him until Illya parks her sword right by their necks and gives them 10 seconds before they kick the bucket. One of them instantly shouts that there's only 50, and the rest also confirm his statement. So, Commander Joshua orders his Tangu and werewolf squads to head to the Cortesia Company's base with the soldiers in tow. Joshua is surprised to learn that they have the advantage in numbers, and Illya asks if he has a plan. Our hero confidently brags that he has a big brain plan to bring everyone back without bloodshed and catches the chief off guard. Joshua then asks Met to station half of her forces here to avoid any mishaps, so she wishes them luck despite wanting to join him. With that, he takes the demi-human army with him toward the enemy base. On his way, Merc informs him that they are mere minutes from the fortress, so Joshua stops everyone to go over the plan one last time. With a goofy grin on his face, Commander Joshua asks everyone to simply surround the fortress without attacking, a plan that Merc seriously doubts will work. He explains that the enemy is free to use their hostages as meat shields. That's why they need to surround them with such pressure that they lose all hope. Although Illya isn't convinced in the slightest, the chief puts her trust in Joshua's brain smoother than a baby's bottom. Once everyone is in position, Joshua asks Wiz to distribute the stack of torches he's made to their army and instructs everyone to grab torches in both hands and circle around the enemy base. On his command, they light their torches one by one, and the three factions of the demi-human alliance take a side, along with their hostages. Finally, Joshua tells the girls to follow his lead, and our hero leads his army straight to the enemy's front gate. Inside the fortress, the soldiers think that the pyromancer, Sir Burnish, is back, but they immediately wet their pants seeing the crazy number of torches approaching them. This ear-deafening screech that assaults their eardrums soon thereafter makes them think they're under attack, so they rush to inform their leader. Joshua smiles at his plan going smoothly, while Illya is proud of her powerful flute attack. Suddenly, the castle leader, Sir Kabis, shows up and demands to know who is playing the horrendous music. After losing his words for a moment, Joshua surprises everyone by saying that he's come on behalf of the Fendel Alliance, a name as popular as Soulja Boy's new album. After questioning his life choices for a moment, Joshua yells that the demi-humans have banded together and now want their hostages back. When Sir Kabis calls him delusional, Joshua tells Fatty that he'd better listen because the sea of torches surrounding his base has already put out the molten moron Sir Burnish. Hearing this, Fatty is unable to believe himself, but his men report that the wannabe warlock was wiped out in seconds. Reminding Kabis that he's surrounded, Joshua tells him to free everyone or meet his maker. Before Fatty can even respond, our boy threatens to crush him under his golem's feet. The leader instantly changes his attitude and begs Joshua to uphold his part of the deal. Joshua reflects Kabis's words back at him, and Illya barely scrapes his shoulder to assert dominance. Fatty immediately commands his troops to release every last prisoner, who comes flooding out the front gate. Joshua asks his party to double-check if anyone's left inside. Once the girls return with all the survivors, Illya bites her lip as she shares that the missing ones have already passed away. Joshua suggests that they should leave and interrogates Kabis to make sure he's released every last one. Fatty confirms this and promises to disappear forever, but Joshua doesn't take prisoners and sends all the slave traders to the slammer. Later that day, when Merc asks our hero what the Fendel thing was, Illya catches on that it refers to the demi-human alliance. Now that their mission is complete, she feels sad that it's time they walk their own paths, but Merc and Asuha assure her that they'll be buddies for life. Joshua seconds their sentiment and cheers Illya up, but he instantly freezes up when she suggests they decide on a leader. Joshua sweats harder than a Fortnite kid during a build battle as the ladies shower him with compliments and beg him to be their representative. After making a last-ditch excuse that he's a human, he folds to Ilya's smile and ends up becoming a mascot of the demi-human alliance. The party returns to Met and the others, celebrating the hostages' return. But what concerns Joshua are the giant pillars of smoke nearby. Met smiles cheerfully as she confesses it's coming from the love-filled dinner she made for Joshua as his wife, making him freeze up. But before Met can declare they're married in front of everyone, Illya towers over her and stares directly into her soul, calling her too crafty for a measly side chick. However, seeing Met not budge from Joshua's side, Illya blushes harder than ever and asks him to marry her instead. Even though marriage isn't even on his to-do list, the ladies throw themselves into battle like rabid dogs, to the point that Illya treats Asuha's simple dinner invite like a seduction move. The winged lowly leaves all the ladies speechless by bragging with a straight face that she's obviously best girl. Smiling wryly at the wild women, Joshua prays that his harem life doesn't spiral into a drama. While everyone is having a blast, the ladies start wondering where he's wandered off to. Meanwhile, our hero takes a stroll in the south, feeling good that the demi-humans can finally chill in peace, though Ilya's tiny village seriously lacks enough houses for everyone. Bob the builder then casually lays down 200 houses, astonishing the chief, who thanks him for being the best. He feels bad for making everyone grind overtime on construction, but the chief reminds him he's the one putting in the most work, leaving him feeling all warm and fuzzy inside. Her cuteness snaps him out of his guilt, and he brings up an idea to set up some fields for a sustainable food supply. She recalls hearing about this whole agriculture thing from the kidnapped folks. So since labor isn't an issue, Joshua points out that all they need now is seeds and cattle. She looks confused when he asks if she's ever heard of sheep, which he describes as being fluffy like cotton candy. Illya gets what he means but says they're not really found around here, so he decides his next mission is to track some of them down. Illya grumbles about him wandering off alone once again, but when he tells her to relax before she gets a stroke, she calls him out for never taking his own advice. After a 2-day break, they stand on the village walls, watching the place come alive. Joshua mentions that a water supply would be pretty nice, making the chief shiver as she wonders if he's about to summon a whole ocean this time. He quickly clarifies that they'll just dig a channel from a nearby river, and by tomorrow, the villagers should have it ready. The chief is absolutely awestruck by how amazing he is before shyly asking if he has time for a little selfish request. She gets all giddy as she gushes about this incredible bathing spot in the mountains. The moment Joshua realizes she's talking about a hot spring, she lights up, rambling about how insanely good they feel. Seeing her blushing face, our boy is unable to refuse. He figures they'll have to go straight to the source since heating up water themselves isn't exactly an option. Illya practically vibrates with excitement at the thought of a hot spring date, but her joy comes crashing to a halt the second Met and the lowlies barge in on their steamy alone time. Merc argues that it's unfair to hog all the fun, while Met insists she's only tagging along as a bodyguard. Not buying it for a second, Illya snaps that there's no bodyguarding happening in a bath towel, while Joshua just chuckles at the eager ladies getting ready to take a dip. When they finally reach the breathtakingly scenic hot springs, Joshua dips a hand in to test the waters, only to get roasted by the boiling heat. Ignoring his suffering, the girls immediately start squabbling over who gets to wash his back. Meanwhile, he's too busy staring in shock as Merc and Asuha casually play with the scalding hot water only to yelp in pain a second later when reality slaps them. He begins planning a method to make it cool enough to enjoy, when suddenly, everyone freezes upon hearing a rumbling as if Irene is about to come skinny dipping. But Merc tells him that it's most likely coming from a large herd of boars traveling very close to the village. Joshua apologizes to the ladies for asking them to postpone their bath and promises Met that he'll make one in the village just for her. After sending Asuha back to inform everyone, the group rushes through the forest toward the loud noise. Puzzled by the massive cloud of dust rising in the distance, he starts worrying that the creatures might be the Demon King's tamed beasts, though it's odd for them to show up in such a remote place. As he wonders why they're moving so slowly, he suddenly realizes that the big black furballs are fleeps, a highly sought-after breed monopolized by the demons for their luxurious fur and milk. While the party tries to figure out why they're here, one of the beasts suddenly curses at him for daring to block their path. Our hero quickly catches on that this talking one was probably trained by the demon army. Before anyone can react, it boldly announces that they're here to steal the yummy grass and will trample over anything in their way. Their leader, Ceres, commands the fleeps to mow the humans down. Shocked by the sudden aggression, Joshua shouts for Illya to retreat, knowing they're outnumbered. But before anyone moves, Merc instinctively steps forward to face them, completely unfazed as her body moves on its own. Just then, the other werewolves arrive, so Joshua tells them to fall back. But to his surprise, the fleeps freeze in fear. The panicked fluffballs start whining about how the doggies are way too scary, and that's when it finally clicks that these demi-humans are no different from regular wolves and sheep. The wolf chief seizes the moment, ordering her people to surround the terrified furballs, sending them into full-blown despair. Wasting no time, Joshua materializes a fence like he's playing Minecraft and successfully traps the herd. Sweating harder than weebs at an anime convention, the sheep spot reinforcements from the village and lose their will to fight. The leader snaps at her trembling flock to stop whining and fight for their pride right until she freezes in place, staring at Illya's giant blade hovering inches from her fluffy face. Our Lady's death stare squeezes out one last baya before the defeated leader curls up in surrender. With Ceres going down so easily, the rest of the sheep quickly lose their fight, making Illya wonder what should be done with them. Joshua steps in, assuring them he means no harm and asking their leader what brought them here. Ceres hesitantly explains that after humans attacked their tiny shed, that's when she and her flock saw an opening and took off. Joshua doesn't sugarcoat the reality check, there are more humans up ahead. The Fleeps immediately burst into tears, prompting Illya to scold him for being too harsh. Giving him her best puppy eyes, she suggests bringing the demonic mutton chops into their alliance. Seeing no harm in it, Joshua offers the Fleeps a home in the village in exchange for their prized fur and milk, of course. Ceres beams with excitement, and the two shake hands on the deal. Later that day, she requests a nice, spacious house near the river, so our hero casually blinks a massive barn into existence, nearly making the sheep pee their wool. They immediately start revering him as stronger than the overhyped demon lord, and Ceres happily offers to strip her fur on demand, saying it's way too hot anyway. After Asuha gets her fill of petting world-class fluff, Joshua notices the entire flock already snoozing in their new home. Speaking on their behalf, Ceres apologizes for their exhaustion and extends an offer that if he ever needs a bed, the Fleeps, famously used as portable mattresses by the demon army, would be more than happy to help. Joshua happily takes up the enticing offer, and by nighttime, he's knocked out on a bed fluffier than clouds. Lost in his dreams, he instinctively squeezes something plump, only to be jolted awake by some rather suggestive sheep noises. Ceres, smirking, teases him for getting a little too comfortable, joking that he must be seriously down bad to start playing with her in his sleep. She teases him to be a bit more considerate, even if he's clearly eager to try some of that milk. Before anything naughty goes down, Illya shows up with a menacing look, ready to bonk the randy sheep girl back to her senses. Seeing the clueless sheep girl sweating in confusion, Illya calms down and drags Ceres away to discuss the best way to harvest her fur, especially the milk. The noise wakes Met, who hopes the innocent sheep girl doesn't get a painful butt whooping. A few more days pass, and Joshua's progress in fishing, agriculture, and the newly upgraded Fleep fur beds leaves the ladies thoroughly impressed. But the biggest game changer is something no one ever thought possible: a river now flowing directly through the village. Seeing Merc practically vibrating with excitement, ready to dive in, Joshua reminds Met loud enough for Merc to hear that the water is meant for drinking and watering the fields. With a cholera crisis averted, he heads out to check on the slave hunter's castle. Met grins, declaring that she's the perfect partner for this mission, while Merc eagerly insists on tagging along too. The wolf Loli says she'll go on ahead, so Joshua bids farewell to the future meatballs before following after. As they move through the forest, Merc suddenly rushes back, looking visibly alarmed. Something is wrong because everyone they see at the fortress is no longer alive. How did a fortress full of slave traders end up as a ghost town overnight? And more importantly, what kind of monster wiped them out before Joshua and the gang even arrived? Drop a cute demon girls in the comments if you're hyped for part 2, because you don't want to miss what's next. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up too if you enjoyed the video. As always, appreciate you watching, can't wait to see you in the next one.